Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar covering cross-object reporting with Apsona for Salesforce. I hope you can see my screen. Everybody can see my screen. If there's any questions, please let me know. My name is Sridhar with Apsona, and I have my colleague Sadhna here as well with me, and she's monitoring the chat. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll begin with everybody being muted, and once we have the webinar mostly completed, I'm hoping to get about 30 minutes in of demo, and then we will start answering questions with you. We'll be hanging around after the webinar for a little while, so feel free to chat with us, drop us questions after the webinar. So what you're seeing here is a really quick, short slide talking about Apsona. We've been on the App Exchange since March 2011, and we have some statistics about us here, 1,000 plus customers, 10,000 users, and so on. And here you can see some of our current customers. Here's a product stack. We have a bunch of different products that we offer. There's a core product called Apsona for Salesforce, and all of these other products are built on top of Apsona for Salesforce. And we will be talking specifically about multi-step reporting today. And a little bit about the features and benefits. All of our products are really easy to install and remove. They're all browser-based, purely Salesforce native. The data is completely secure, never leaves your org. All interactions you perform with the apps are completely live. So when you make a change to your data or you pull a report, it all works within the current state of the database in Salesforce. And there's no plugins, and so it's also very secure and very fast, as you will see. So let's get into the. Let me go with that. I will close off this PowerPoint, and I want to show you. Before talking about the demo itself, before getting into the app itself, I want to set a little bit of context. What I want to do is talk about what it takes to build a report first. What does it mean to build a report? So let's look at a report, an example report. This one here. What I've done is set up a mock-up of the report. This is the example that we'll work with, except that to me, it feels like this is a little too much information. So I'm going to show you a smaller report first and then work towards this report. But in any case, just to set some context, what do we mean by building? What do we need to do when we build a report? We first need to identify what columns need to go in the report. We need to answer these questions right here. What are the report columns? What objects and fields do they come from? And what metrics do they use? How do they relate to each other? And what sort of filtering is needed? That's a set of questions we try to answer in this mockup here. So I've just created a little Excel sheet in which I will show in the first tab the list of columns. In this report, what I want to do is create a report that shows me board member names and emails, people, and these people happen to be board members, of accounts. So we want to show the account name and the account city of the account of which they are board member. And the way someone is identified as a board member is via the affiliation object. There is an affiliation custom object in the org that we'll be looking at. And so we will use that fact. Then we will also need the names of the opportunities associated, the name of the highest opportunity in the last 4 years associated with the account. And for each one of those opportunities, we'll get line items and then differences and so on. Now, this is already a little too complicated. So what I want to do is whittle it down a little bit and show a smaller version of it. It's basically the same report to begin with, except that it's got fewer columns, as you can see, just the left part of the report. So we'll start by building this report, and then we'll enhance it to build this report. So the way we do that is let's go into the let's see the dev org right here. Let it load up. Oh, it wants me to identify mice. Nice. What a time for that. Let's see. All right, so here we are in the dev org. We're running Classic here, but Apsona will work just as fine in Lightning. Let's switch to Lightning so that you can see the thing working in Lightning. That will take a moment, as you know. And then we have Apsona in here. So let's hit the Apsona tab. So here, what happens is when you hit the tab, the Apsona window loads up underneath there. It's its own little VF page with its own window that contains a menu bar, which you'll see in a moment, that shows objects that I have configured for it. And alongside the object list, there we go, we have charts and such. So there's a list of objects here, account, contact, opportunity, and such. So we won't worry about any of this stuff. We'll look at the multi-step reporting tool right here. So when the way you access the multi-step reporting tool is by going into reporting tools up here on the right, and then clicking multi-step reports. And it'll show me a list of the multi-step reports that we have built so far already. And so we won't worry about any of these either. We will start by building a new multi-step report. The way you do that is by clicking the new button here. And we're taken to a multi-step report wizard. It may help to actually get some more real estate. So I will pop it open into its own window and go into reporting tools and make a new report right here. So I get some more real estate up at the top. So let's give this report a name. Let's call it example 1. And let's say that it'll go into my, public folder. And so what we're doing here is we just give it a name. We'll give it a description, example for demo, let's say. And we'll start by adding steps to it. What does it mean to add a step? When we click add step, it'll give us a UI where there's a bunch of tabs in which we identify the different things that have to happen in one step. And what is a step? A step is a sub-report, if you will. One sub-report that pulls data from one object and immediately related objects. So how do we set that up? Well, to answer that question, we want to go back to the mockup, not that one. Let's try this one, this mockup, and see how to build out that report. What do we need here? We need the board member name and email, which we now annotate with where they come from. The board member name comes from the contact and affiliation object. Because of the affiliation object plays the relationship between this piece and this piece here. And these columns come from the account object, obviously. So that's what we've said here, is this comes from the contact, this comes from the account. And if you look at the relationships between them, this tab here shows the relationships among the objects involved. So this is the key piece of information so that we know where to pull the data from. So we know in this example that we want these columns to come from the contact object, these to come from the account object, except that we also want the relationship to be set up via the affiliation object. So when we go back to Apsona here, let me pull this out and make me another window that way. Since it wants to come from the contact object, since we need the contact info from the contact object, as we saw there, let's make this be a contact step. Give it a name, contacts. And in the database object chooser, let's select the contact object. And then once we've selected that field, that object, we can go into retrieved fields and pull in the field chooser here. You have a list of the fields of the contact on the right. And you also have other objects that are one step away from the contact object. And you can pull in fields from those as well. One key thing to notice here, we just started building a report without worrying about things like report types. If you look at Salesforce's report building process, there's a fairly elaborate sequence you need to follow. You need to create report types. You need to find a report type that fits your need. If you don't have your fields set up in the report type, you need to go in and add them. None of that stuff is needed here. You just jump right in. The thing knows what objects and fields are needed. You pick the ones you need, and you're good to go. So in this case, let's get the name of the contact. What are the things we wanted? The full name of the contact. We wanted also, let's see, this one here, we wanted the board member email. So let's get the email of the contact. We've gotten those two. What we can do in addition is when we get over to filter terms, we are only interested in people that are board members somewhere. So we'll add a term here, add a filter term where we say in the affiliation here, we find the affiliation object, which is a child object. You see that there's a list of all the objects which are related. We pick off the affiliation and we say that the that the row equals board member, right? For at least one record. And let's say also I want to get the contact ID and the account ID, because I will need those in a moment. So let's get the let's see if I can get the account here. There's the account ID. Well, let's just do a save and run right now to get some quick instant gratification. Well, there we have a very small report, one step only, that contains the contact name and email, but it has some of the way, we've gone some of the way here towards this outline. We've gotten this first part here, right? So now what we want to do is pull out the account information for these people. So let's add a step here. Let's edit this thing and add a step here. This time we will pull the data from the affiliation object. And why is that? I feel let's see, let's call it affiliations, right? Why is it coming from the affiliation object? Because that's the thing that encapsulates the connection between the contact and the account. So let me go into affiliation here. And you'll see in a moment, another reason why I'm selecting affiliation is because if I go into the retrieved fields of the affiliation, since we can get from the current objects to all of the parent and child objects, in particular, from the affiliation object, I can get to the account and to the contact because it has lookups to the contact and the account because it's a junction object. So what we'll do is we need to make sure that the contact of the affiliation, the contact ID of the affiliation is available. On the account side, we want the name, the account name, and the account. I think what we said was the account city. So let's get the billing city of the account. So we get those two bits of information. We also want the account ID because let's see here. Oops. It's called organization. Never mind. That's the one. So if you hover over this thing, it'll tell you that it's a lookup to account. But anyway, that's the organization ID that is available to us. Now, what we'll do also is we need to line up the affiliation records, the account records that we pull in from this step with the records that we got from this step. The way we do the lineup is by going to the linkages over here and looking at the list of available choices. So it gives you a bunch of choices here. One of them, the one that seems to be most appropriate, is the one that says contact account matches affiliation organization. With this step here, pull data from the affiliation object, which has the organization ID, which is the account ID available. And what we want to do is make sure that the account ID of the affiliation, which is pulled in this separate sub-report, matches the account ID that was pulled in this sub-report. So we're really weaving together multiple sub-reports into one. So I'm going to select that linkage. And when I do a save and run now, I've got a slightly wider report, but now I have contact information and account name and account billing city. Well, it turns out this contact ID is probably not needed for our purposes. So we can just remove that. We can go into affiliations, go into retrieved fields, and we can take that out like that and save and run, and we get the affiliation list available. So the next thing to do is, let's go back and look at our mockup. We actually got done with the first part, right? So what we've done is we've created a report that produces this part of the report from the mockup. So the next thing to do, let's see if I can take a deep breath here and switch gears. The next thing to do is to look at the extended example, right? So here, what we're doing is we're building out the same report here. As you can see, those first 4 columns are still available as the first 4 columns here, but I have added a couple more columns to illustrate what kinds of things you can do with multi-step reporting. So here, in the remaining part of the report, what I need to do is for this block here, I want the highest opportunity provided by that account in the last 4 years. I want the highest. I'm not really interested in specific fields, although in this case I'm only showing the name and amount and opportunity close date. But I want basically the identity of the opportunity, which was the highest op in the last 4 years. That's what I want to pull here. So the way I do that is I go into the report editor again. Let's edit the report. Or better yet, let's go back to the list. Let's go to all reports and find the one we just created, example 1. Let's clone it so that you get an idea of what cloning looks like. We just made a copy of it. So let's make it example 2. And in this case, we want to add a step that pulls data this time from, obviously, from the opportunity object, right? Because if you look at the mockup here, this comes from the opportunity object. So the fields should be pulled in from opportunity. So let's say, let's take it give it a shot. Let's say we want the highest up, that's the name of the step. And we want this thing to come from the opportunity object. So I'll select that. And in the retrieved fields, once again, I want the name of the opportunity. I want the amount of the opportunity, and I want the close date of the opportunity. Those were the things I had in the mockup. So the close date is what I want from the opportunity. Now, I want not just every opportunity, but the one that has the highest value. That was the definition. What does it mean to have the highest value? It's the one that has the highest amount. And you can set that choice in this range and sort tab by selecting the record that containing the highest value of amount, like that. So I've selected that choice to make sure that I get only that opportunity, the one with the highest value. And then finally, I go into linkages. As before, I need to make sure that the opportunity, the account of the opportunity that's being pulled here, lines up with the account of the affiliation that's being pulled here. So when I go look in here, I have a problem. You see that the choices I have made only talk about the name fields here. And that's not what I want to link on. I want to make sure that the record ID of the account matches the record ID of this account here. How do I do that? I first of all, let's make sure that in the retrieved fields, let's go into account here and pull the account name. And then if I go into linkages here, you will see that we've got contact account available here. I'm sorry. What did I do here? I missed it in both places. What did I do here? Let me save that one moment. Come on. Something. Oh, there we go. All right. What did I do here? Let me go back into affiliations and look at retrieved fields. Did I get the organization here? I think I did. What did I do here wrong? Let's look at retrieved fields. I did get the account ID. So perhaps I am just doing the wrong thing here. Let's find the organization. Why am I blanking out? Try this again. Contact account matches opportunity account. Yes, I'm just not waking up. I need to take this guy right here. Sorry about that. I had a little blind spot there for a second. I need to line up those guys, save and run. And you see now that you have the highest op available for each one of those contacts. For each one of those contacts, we have the account name, and we have also the opportunity name associated with that account. So having built this out so far, what we want to do also, since we have the highest value opportunity available, we want, you know what, I also want to make sure that we edit this highest op filter so that we add we get only those opportunities that were in the last 4 years. I think I said that in the specification. So I want to go in there, close date, in range. Let's say I'm going to go through years, and let's say we want to go through 2017 through 2020, or apply that and save and run. And we get a slightly smaller list of opportunities. Next, what we'll do to stay in compliance with what we said as far as mockup here, we want also the total line item value for each one of those opportunities. So opportunities have line items. If you look at this this diagram over here, we've been building out a report based upon this sort of a diagram. In the first example, we looked at these three objects: contact, affiliation, and account. And now in the second example, we're building it out further and saying we want to get this data from opportunity and this data from opportunity line item or opportunity product, whatever it is called. Opportunity line item is the API name, and the label is opportunity product. And what we want to do is get the total value of the line items, as in a metric value, from the opportunity product for that highest value opportunity. That is what we want to show here in this last column. So we do that by going back here and editing this report and adding a step. Where should it come from? Since it comes from the opportunity product, since the metric value comes from the opportunity product, clearly we should select the opportunity product object. So let's call this thing total OLI value, opportunity line item value is what we'll call it. And let's say that this comes from the product, opportunity product object, that one here, that one right there. And in the retrieved fields, I will need to connect the opportunity product with the opportunity, clearly. So I want the linkage, the lookup to opportunity. I select that. And then I want the total of the list price of the line item. So if I want the total, as in I want a metric value, I can't just click the list price here. I want the total list price. And Apsona offers the ability to do that. If you open up the metrics panel below, there's a list of all of the fields that are metricable. So in particular, it gives me the list price here. And I can say, get me the sum of the list price. So I can get those two values over there. And once we've done that, we go into linkages. And once again, we have an issue here. What did I do wrong this time? Same problem. I got the opportunity ID here, but I did not get the opportunity ID over here because I wanted to correlate these two. So let's save this guy, go back over to the highest op, get the retrieved field value. And from the opportunity, I want the opportunity ID. That one right there. I will save it. I will go back to the OLI value step, and I go into linkages, and you see that the linkage now becomes available. I connect those two, and then I save and run. And there's a wider report now that contains the total line item value. So we can reduce this a little bit. Oops, how about that? And we get a comparison of the opportunity value and the total OLI value. So that gives you the report in its entirety. So we've got all of these functions available. So one last thing I wanted to talk about. There is also the ability in the multi-step reporting tool to add calculation values. So for example, let's say that we want to include in this report the difference between these two values here. The difference between the opportunity value and the OLI value. So let's say that opportunities are comprised of services and products, and we want to see what the service value was, which is the difference between these two. So let's edit the report, and let's add a step here. And when we do so, the same UI becomes available. And let's say we do calc here, and we get this. We set this up as a calculation with formulas, and move over to the. Notice that these tabs now have changed to calculated fields, and these things get grayed out. Let's add a field. Let's make this be the difference value. And let's say that its result type is a currency. It must be a currency, obviously. And we will add reference fields here. We want the opportunity amount minus the line item sum, that one right there. So we'll save that, edit, and then save and run, and go off to the right, and you see that you have the difference available as well between this line item total and the opportunity amount. So that's about entirety of one report. In the build process, one of the things I wanted to point out, if you go back and look at this report again, we ended up with 5 steps: contacts, affiliations, and then so on. What we had to do was to pull in contacts from one step and accounts from another step. Now, it is possible to make this a little bit more efficient by combining these two into one if we had started with the affiliations, if we had created a first step that came from the affiliations object, then we could have pulled both the contact and the account information in one shot. So let's say I go back to the list and edit this report. Actually, let's clone this report and make this be example 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break some linkages here. I'm going to take this off. Let's see. This opportunity is linked to the account here. I'm going to break that linkage first of all and save it. The reason being that I'm going to remove these 2 steps now and create one new step. So let's say I'm going to remove the contact step. I may not be able to. Let's see, if I try deleting that, it'll say it cannot be deleted because a later step is dependent on it. So I have to go into the affiliations object step and remove that linkage as well and save it. Once I do that, I go in here and I can delete this step and it'll say, well, this step will be deleted. So let's go ahead and delete it. And now we have affiliations at the top. We can, in the retrieved fields, we've got the organization name and the account name. Well, let's also pull in the contact fields directly in that same step. So if I go into the list here of the fields, I can get the full name of the contact, and I can get the email address of the contact. And let's reorder these things so that it looks conformant with what we wanted to do. Additionally, let's also filter it so that we only get those affiliations that have a role of board member. So equals board member, right? So let's save that. And then back to linkages here, and let's make sure that the linkage is set up correctly. Affiliation organization matches this opportunity account. Let's save that. And let's set up the linkage again over here. Make sure that, oh, that's set up correctly. Let's save and run. And you see the same report, the contact's full name and email, the organization name, billing city, and highest opportunity, all available in the same way. Okay, let's talk about linkages for just a second here. Let's look at, let's see, this linkage right here, this second step. Always it is the case that the first step does not have linkages in it. It's not meaningful to ask about linkages because it doesn't link to anything earlier. But if you look at the later step, let's pick the one that's, let's look at this one here. Let's edit this report and look at the linkages over here. We have already set up a linkage, but if I were to remove this linkage and then look at the available list of linkages in here, it offers up to me all of the different ways in which I can line up the fields in this step with the fields in the previous step. So here it's showing me account field, the account lookup field, matching or not matching the account in the previous step. So this steps, the contact steps field, contact account, matching, I can select this choice, in which case I want to make sure that the accounts line up. If I select this choice, I will be making sure that they don't line up, that the negation logic is useful in some situations. It is also possible to link based on non-lookup fields, although it tends to be a lot less efficient to use non-lookup fields. But we do support that. So you can look up based on, you can link based on string fields like full name in this case. These are the 2 string fields available, so it lets you line up on those as well. So in this particular case, it makes obviously the most sense to link on the account ID, which is why I selected that linkage. Right? So if I save and run, of course, we're back to the same old report, which is the 2-step report, which we had earlier in the process. We are coming up to 30 minutes. I guess I should also point out where once you've created the report, you can export it. Let's go back to the list and run the second one. We can export the report, the content of the report. If I export it in Excel, you'll see that it looks reasonably decent. And that's what it looks like. Let's enable editing. So you've got the data in the report available in Excel, And in addition, you've got summaries at the bottom. So those are automatically generated by the Excel export. So that's another feature you have available. You can also export to CSV if you want to. You can use it to generate documents. You can use this add to campaign feature to add all of the contacts to a campaign, or all of the leads if you had leads in this to a campaign, and so on. There's a bunch of visualization features available, which I don't think we'll have time for. It's possible to change filters, so you can dynamically change temporarily change the filters of all of the steps in here and run them all in one shot. That's about it that I wanted to talk about at this point. I will start taking questions. So please throw your questions in the chat. Okay, let's see if, when you add it to a folder, does it mean it goes into the native SFDC report folders? No. Apsona has its own list of folders. Let's see if we can show you that. If I go back to the list, here's a list of folders. I can create a new folder right here, and it'll, that's odd. Maybe what did I do wrong here? Let me see. Did I not share it? Why did it unshare? I didn't realize that. Okay, so here's a list of folders. And you can add and you create a new folder, like I said, over here, and it'll become available in here. There's a notion of global folders and such if you wanted to do that as well. So let's, you know what I did? I hit the wrong button earlier. So let's look at the Q&A again here. I do not have multi-step reports as a choice. Well, that's an add-on. You need to install the multi-step reports add-on to it. Let's see, can't read the role field values. Well, actually, in that particular object, the role object is, the role field is a text field. It's not a pick list field. If you look at the account contact role object, that object has a role field, which is a pick list field. So I had to type in the text value because that field is a text field, not a pick list field. That's the reason why I had to do that. Do Salesforce reports not have multi-step reporting for different objects? Not to my knowledge, no. You might try that. Let's see, the selected highest value does not include a filter for closed one. I'm not sure I understand that question. Michael sent me an email about that. I'm not sure I understood that one. How to rename columns? Yeah, you can, that's a good point. If I go into the example and edit it, you can go into the retrieved fields tab and simply hover over it, click that little thing and say, make this be name and apply, and it changes the name of the column right away. Again, another thing you cannot do with native Salesforce reports, you cannot rename columns to my knowledge. So back here, let's see, back to Q&A. What is the difference between linkages tab to link steps and combining two earlier steps option? That's a great question. The combining option lets you take unions of data. It's really the matter. If you think of two steps that you have data for, and you want to line them up vertically instead of horizontally. I mean, if you can think of linkages as lining up data horizontally, and combining steps lets you put the data together vertically, one after the other. That's what it does. How would I build a report that will show the 10 highest donations since the last FY? In just the same way, I selected the highest. Instead, you could select the 10 highest here. If I go in here to highest op and I look at range and sort, I could use the first 10 instead of the first one. That's all you need to do for the 10 highest. Back into Q&A here. We've had a challenge on running reports that pertain to activity on the account level related to another related custom object. I want to confirm, yes, you can retrieve activity information through this tool as well. You just have tasks and events available as custom objects, and you just need to expose them into the report. How would you use multi-step reports to find donors that gave through third-party organizations? You can use the soft credits object. You can use the opportunity contact role object or the soft credits object, depending on how you record your soft credits. And basically, it will be an object available in this list of objects, and you pick it, and build the report off of it. How to display reports? Not sure I understand that question, Mark. Shoot me an email. It may be that I'm not answering all your questions, so please shoot me emails. We're available to answer any questions you may have about this tool. And I'll try and get through all of these questions as much as I can. Why are linkages necessary? That's a great question. If you have two lists of data, if you think of the data coming in from two sub-reports, let us say, what we did here, we did a contact list and an affiliation list in this report over here. Each of those is built as a separate list, so that when you run this report, each of these sub-reports is built as a separate list, and you need to line them up. You need to make sure that the contacts account line up in the two steps, and that is the reason for the linkage. The linkage makes sure that we talk about the correct account for each contact. That's the point of the linkage. It is not just a verification. No, it's a matter of lining things up. Is it possible to get a copy of the spreadsheet as a template with the 4 questions to ask? Yes, I'm going to have all of this collateral available on our website and as part of the email that we'll send out. We'll send out an email following up for this webinar, including the recording and all of the sheets and such that we've used for the demo. Can you show an example of a filter to only include rows for which the parent record has 1 or more child records? For example, an account with 1 or more opportunity records. If you think about this thing here, this step here, the very first step, and look at the filter terms, that is exactly what we did. We pulled the contacts that have 1 or more affiliation roles of a particular type. So that's what this filter term is saying. It is saying, get me the contacts that have, for at least 1 record, an affiliation role that equals a board member. So we're not only are we pulling contacts with a child record of a certain type, we're able to filter the child records in a certain way and insist that only the contacts that have such a child record are pulled into this step. That's the purpose of this filter condition. I could have said instead, if I'm only interested in contacts that have an affiliation, I could simply say record ID exists, and that will give me contacts that have an affiliation of some sort. But in this case, we wanted affiliations which are board members, and that is why I selected the other way to do things. Let's go back to Q&A. Could you touch on multiple multi-step reports merging into the same Excel template? That is a whole other question, Sam. We have some demos on that, so let me try and finish up the rest of them. Rather than going through the highest invoice, could you have the sum of all the invoices? Absolutely. You can do a metric which is what we did over here. If you look at the total OLI value, that's what we did. We pulled the total of all of the opportunity line items. Can you go over the calculation part again? Let me try and get through all of this quickly, and we'll come back to that. Can people subscribe or follow these reports in Apsona? Yes, we do have a scheduler available as a separate product, and you can use it to schedule these reports and send it to people who are not Salesforce users. Anyone that has an email address can get reports from the scheduler. Are we able to report data, edit data in the report itself? No, not yet. That's a feature that's been asked for. At some point, we might build that. All the opportunities of a given contact. Range and sort is available only in multi-step reports. Correct. It is not available in single-step reporting. Does the add-on have a cost? Yes, it does. I'll give you the pricing information in just a second. Maybe it is worth looking at that. Let's go look at the website and talk about products. If you look at the pricing info over here, here's the pricing info for all of our products. That's the base product, Apsona for Salesforce. And the one we were talking about is this one here. Its base price is $540 a year for up to 3 users and $180 per additional user. And if you're a nonprofit, you will go in here to look at the for nonprofits page, and there are the prices for the nonprofits. It's $420 a year for up to 3 users and $140 for additional users. Back to Q&A. Michael says, in the report you built, you're showing the highest opportunity, but there was no point that you specified that it had to be the highest closed one up. rather than the highest op that exists, even if open or lost. Well, that is also possible. All I need to do is to go to the highest op step and add a filter term here that says it's a closed one op. I mean, we restricted it to ops in a particular date range. We could just as well have restricted it to ops that are closed. So it's the same deal, Michael. Is there a query limit on the number of rows? Great question. No, there is not. We have added lots of workarounds to our code to make sure that we don't have such query limits. We've had customers that pull 1 million rows in one multi-step report. So it is absolutely possible to pull as many rows as you want for most practical purposes. As long as there is a key field that connects any object, we should be able to retrieve data. Correct. You should be able to pull data as long as you have key fields across objects. If there are multiple contacts with the same value on the first step, that brings up a great point. Every step, every report automatically dedupes its data on the columns that you have included in the report. So here, in this step over here, let's see if I can run the report again. What did I do here? I blew it. Let's see if I can try this one more time. This list included only the deduplicated names and emails. So if I put in the contact ID, I will get I will get duplicates included because the contact ID is unique across all contacts. So yes, if there are multiple contacts, they will be collapsed into one. Wendy says, can you use nested filters in these reports? Yes, you can. You can pull nested filters into it. Soft credit, yes, you can use. You start with contact roles. I think is if you wanted to ensure that you want only those contacts that have soft credits, then you would start with the contact soft credit object. But if you wanted to include in the report any contact, regardless of whether they had a soft credit or not, then you would start with the contact object. I think that's about it. It's on the chat. Okay, let's see if. Can you explain how to choose the first step? That is always the classic question. How did I choose the first step? And the answer to that question is essentially you need to start from the mockup and figure out which object to use. So back to this same diagram here. In the mockup, the first two columns say I want the contact name and the contact email, and therefore I identify that those things come from the contact object. And then I have a choice of whether I want to start with the contact object, which is the most natural place to start because that's the thing that has the name and email, or I could have started from the affiliation object because it's the junction that drives this step and the next step, and furthermore, I can get contact fields from the junction object. That's the reason for the two variants I showed you, is that you could start with either the contact object or the affiliation object, depending on the need. If you wanted to include all contacts, regardless of whether they had an affiliation, then you would start with the contact object. But if you wanted only those contacts that have an affiliation of some sort, you could go either way. You could start with the contact or with the affiliation. Let's see, what else? I'll add you to the list, certainly. We will make the template available. The question is, will you make this template, the mockup template, available to all users? Yes. What we will do is when we send out an email, we will include the recording and the links to the templates so that you can play with them. Would it be possible to add user prompts? User prompts are really part of the document generation piece, not part of the reporting piece. And in the document generation piece, in that app, there is the ability to do what are called run parameters, which are basically user prompts. I have challenges getting reports to finish running without query timeout. This is a common issue. The only way that you can get around query timeouts is by honing your filtering criteria, because Salesforce has some very strong filtering. Timeout criteria applied on the back end, and there's really very little we can do to control that. So you have to restrict your filtering in some way to bring it down to the range that you want. What else? I think that's about it. I think I've answered most of these questions. So feel free to email us beyond. We will be happy to answer any questions you may have. We'll do everything we can to support you when you start this off. What does it mean to when some column rows are blank? That's because there was a case where the affiliation had an empty account, and that's why we have this strange situation. If there's if you have data on both sides, they will show on both sides of the junction. Thanks so much. I hope you liked the demo. Please do let us know how things turned out, and we will follow up with you. Have a wonderful day.